you here once again in our afternoon session. The workshop today is hosted by Richflood, a leading continental provider of environmental and social due diligence services for investment in Africa. The aim of this workshop today is to have a comparative analysis of some of the environmental regulations that we have in different countries in Africa. And during the morning session, we had 3 contributors who came around and gave us insights into what environmental regulations in some countries have. First, we had Barrister Joe, who put us through overview of environmental laws in Africa, taking us through the aims and objectives of environmental law and telling us about the significance of laws that are guiding the, and he also shed light on different types of laws that exist in Africa. Also, we had Mr. Ojo Sunday and Mr. Ukeme Yelu, who both gave us comparative insight into environmental regulations in Egypt and South Africa, while we also viewed that of Nigeria as a way of comparison. I would like to let you know that this workshop is being recorded and the video will be made available on the Richflood YouTube channel. Also, all participants are in listen-only mode, and we would want you to please rename yourself and add your organization in brackets after your name for proper identification when you have questions or contribution. This session is going to be a little bit different as well, because in the morning session, we had different people from different countries who wanted to make comments about the environmental regulations in their respective countries, but because of our time, we couldn't accommodate that. And we kind of have a provision for that this afternoon session. So if you do have contribution to make during the afternoon session, you can use the raising of hand icon on your Zoom, or you can drop it in the chat box, send it directly to me so that an unmute notification will be sent to you for us to listen to you, then you can air your views as well. So this afternoon session, we are going to have a continuation of what we started in the morning. Like I said, we couldn't take all the questions we received in the morning as well because of the limited time that we had. We are going to be having another form of discussion this afternoon, but this time around, we are going to focus on some countries different from the one we had in the morning. So this afternoon session, we are going to be taking a look at some of the environmental regulations in Ethiopia and some of the environmental regulations in Syria alone. So for a start, we are just going to go straight. We are going to go straight into those countries, and to start with, we'll take a look at, I want us to take a look at the constitution that exists in these 2 countries. We were made to understand earlier, which we will still lay emphasis on again, now that the Nigerian Constitution of 1999 has certain provisions in different sections, which aims at safeguarding the environment. So we would like Mr. Ukeme to tell us about the similar kind of constitution that exists in Ethiopia, after which Mr. Sunday will take us through that of Sierra Leone. Over to you, Mr. Ukeme Yelu.
Thank you very much, Ms. Adiola, for this opportunity. I welcome everybody back to this afternoon session, where we'll be exploring the environmental laws in various countries, and I'll be throwing a little more light on the environmental laws in Ethiopia. And like we pointed out in the morning session, where we talked about the 1999 Constitution, which guides environmental laws in Nigeria. Unlike Ethiopia, and Ethiopia being the oldest independent nation in Africa, Ethiopia adopted environmental issues long before the introduction of modern states. And just like I'm trying to point out, the rulers from the 16th century onward had guiding documents, and this document was called Festai Negis. That is, it means rules of king. So that was what the 16th century rulers of Ethiopia used to govern their subjects and also administer environmental laws and try to ensure that things are done the proper way. And this was also replaced by the first constitution. So the first constitution for Ethiopia was in 1923. You can imagine how old that was. Some countries then did not even exist. So that was the first constitution. But in the 19th century, because of the need to come up with modern ways of doing things and the introduction of cabinet ministers, so the Ethiopian Constitution came on board, which was in December 1994. So this now gave birth to the Environmental Protection Authority proclamation of 9 in 1995. So is this Environmental Protection Authority now proclamation that 1995 following the 1994 constitution that now gave birth to structural and modern platform and methods of managing issues that has to do with the environment. So that's the big background of the constitution and how these laws will follow up as regards environmental laws in Ethiopia. We are going to look further how they translate into even the environmental, how the laws were promulgated and the section that talks about that. Over to you, Moderator.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Okeme. Okay, so I will be talking on the environmental laws, and we'll be starting with the Constitution of Syria alone, the Constitution that exists in Syria alone. And that Constitution was the one that was enacted, that was promulgated in 1991. So it was called the National Constitution of Syria alone. And then this particular constitution, it affirms the country's commitment to harness all the natural resources of the nation in order to promote national prosperity and a dynamic economy. And as everyone knows, that Sierra Leone is a country that has a lot of diamonds. So with that particular mineral resources, the constitution has a special place for the activities that relates to the environment. And the particular section in that constitution that talks about the environment is the section 18. The section 18 of the National Constitution of Syria alone, which makes provisions for environmental rights. And according to the constitution, it states that nothing contained in or done under authority of any law shall be held to be inconsistent with or in contravention of this section, to the extent that the law in question makes provision which required in the interest of defense, public safety, public order, public morality, public health, or the conservation of the natural resources, such as minerals, money, and some other things. So that is the section in the Constitution that talks about the environment. All right, so thank you so much, Moderator.
Okay, thanks for that insight on the constitution that exists in both countries. Right now, I would like us to take a look at environmental assessment. Environmental assessment seems like something that is required by all countries, starting from the international level. The World Bank particularly takes it very seriously. And I know that in Nigeria, there is a provision for EIA Act Cap E1211 of 2004, which has to do with assessing the potential impact of a proposed project on the natural environment. And it has several sections also which states what should be done, who should do it, when it should be done, and then, you know, the requirements for ensuring that everything in the environment is being kept safe, even while we are making use of the resources. Do we have something similar in these two countries? Over to you, our contributors.
Thank you very much. Yeah, although the one in Ethiopia is a little bit older compared to Nigeria, as in after they must have transformed into setting up, coming up with modern policies after the forming of the cabinet. I think the EIA actually was came up as a result. EIA administration in Ethiopia came up after the proclamation of the Environmental Protection Authority, like I said earlier, in 1995. And this is the most important step in setting up the legal framework for the environment in Ethiopia. And this proclamation, which was 1995, led to the EIA proclamation in 2002. The Environmental Protection Authority led to the EIA proclamation in 2002. And this proclamation provides for the reestablishment and functioning of the Environmental Protection Authority and autonomous federal government organ. So in managing the environment, the authority now adopt this EIA proclamation in 2002 as a legal instrument to guide them in administration of the EIA processes in Ethiopia. And there are several organs of government that, apart from that manage the different sectors of the economy, all of them adopt this proclamation, EIA proclamation of 2002. And for instance, we have the Solid Waste Management Proclamation, which was formulated in 2007. This also falls back to the EIA proclamation of 2002 as a benchmark to set up or regulate every environment issue that has to do with solid waste management. Also, they have the Environmental Pollution Control Proclamation of 2002, which also try to manage all the environmental pollution, whether in terms of the air emission or effluent emission into the water bodies, controlling and coming up with penalties for offenders in terms of environmental pollution. So that is basically the benchmark, the legal framework that tries to manage or regulate environmental regulation in Ethiopia. That is the Environmental Protection Agency, which was proclaimed in 1995, and the EIA proclamation of 2002. I think we are going to look further as to how these organs are really intertwining or relating as to how we manage the environment in Ethiopia. Over to you, Moderator.
Thank you for that insightful information. In Sierra Leone, do we have things like this as well in place, Mr. Sunday?
Yes, of course we do. In Sierra Leone, before I move to the Environmental EIA Act, there are basically two legal frameworks. There are basically two legislations that really take care of the environment in Sierra Leone. The first one is the Sierra Leone National Environment Policy, which was promulgated in 1994, and also the National Environmental Protection Act that was promulgated in 2000, and then it was last amended in 2011. So the Environmental Impact Assessment Act of Sierra Leone is under the National Environmental Protection Act. Is under the National Environmental Protection Act. Specifically, the Part 4 of that act is the one that talks about the environmental impact assessment. And this particular part, it describes the prohibition of certain activities, and it also talks about the application for and the issue of licenses, different licenses. Apart from the EIA approval, there are some other licenses that also must be issued by the Ministry of Environment in Sierra Leone. And there are some projects, according to that act, that some EIA must be done into the, particularly the section 25, which is the section 25 of that particular act, is one that talks about the factors for determining whether a project requires an environmental impact assessment. And according to the some things that are listed there, it says the factors are the environmental impact, a project that will have an environmental impact on the community. So such projects must undergo environmental impact assessment. Also, another factor that determines is the location of the project. If the project is located in a sensitive area, an environmental impact assessment must be carried out, and also whether the project transforms the locality. And the magnitude of that transformation also determines whether the EIA will be carried out for that particular project. Also, the section 26 of that Environmental Protection Act of the Sierra Leone is the one that describes the content of the EIA. Is one that describes the content of the EIA. And according to the section, an EIA contains a true statement and description of the location of the project and the surroundings, the principle and the concept and the purpose of the project, the direct or indirect effects of the project on the environment and the people, and some other things and some other ones. And then the act that basically talk about the social aspect of it is under the Local Government Act 2004 that was amended in 2017, which establishes the local council as the highest political authority in the locality. And it stresses the fact that a community development action plan must be done if a project is to be located, if a project is to be sited in a particular at a particular location. So this is the EIA Act in Sierra Leone and the various factors that are associated with it. Okay, so thank you. Over to you, the moderator.
Thank you very much, our two contributors. Right about now, we are going to move forward into speaking of regulatory bodies. Nigerian as a government vests power in some of the ministries, departments, and agencies, from the Federal Ministry of Environment and to MMSD, Ministry of Mines and Steel Development, the Ministry of Works, which has to do with the infrastructural projects, Ministry of Power for the energy sector, and so many of them, the NESRA, the NOSRA, and all of those regulatory bodies to ensure the implementation of the regulations as postulated by the 1999 Constitution. So do we have things like this? Do we have this kind of nature in these other African countries, like in Ethiopia, for instance? Do we have regulatory bodies manning the affairs of these regulations? Or in Sierra Leone, for instance, do we have regulatory bodies responsible for enforcement of some of these regulations that has been postulated by their government? Over to you, the contributors.
Okay, yes, yes, we do. And in Sierra Leone, we have a lot of ministries, we have a lot of departments, and we have a lot of agencies that ensure that the environmental laws and the environmental legislations are being complied with. And the supervisory ministry in charge of the environment in Sierra Leone is the Sierra Leone Ministry of Lands, Country Planning, and the Environment. That is the major ministry that is in charge of the environment. And in particular, in that ministry, we have the Environmental Protection Agency at that ministry, the Environmental Protection Agency, which is the principal authority that is charged with the responsibility for coordination and reporting on the implementation of environmental activities. So, and we have some other ministries also that make sure that the different environmental laws, the different sectoral laws, because apart from the major Environmental Protection Act and the National Environmental Policy that I talked about earlier, we have some sectoral laws, a lot of them from the Ministry of Mines, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Agri, Ministry of Lands, and some other ones. So this ministry too, they are the one that make sure that these sectoral laws are being complied with. For instance, we have the Ministry of Health and Sanitation, In Sierra Leone, we have the Ministry of Works and Technical Maintenance. We have the Ministry of Transport and Communications. We have the Ministry of Social Welfare and Gender. We have the Ministry of Youth and Sport. We have the Ministry of Mineral Resources that make sure that the activities of the mining activities in that country does not have a negative impact on the environment. Also, we have some other private sector NGOs that also make sure that people comply with the environmental laws. Also, the Ministry of Energy and Power, the Ministry of Energy and Power, the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. So these are the ministries and the agencies that make sure that the environmental legislations in Sierra Leone are being complied with. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. In addition to that, in Ethiopia, there are other relevant legislation in Ethiopia, and there are various laws and regulations in Ethiopia that are developed by other sectors which have the bearing on the environmental issues and which require environmental impact assessment process and decision making. So following the proclamation of in 2002, it requires the need to establish a system to facilitate harmony among the federal and regional environmental protection authorities and sectoral units. So apart from the federal environmental protection authority, we also have regional environmental protection authorities covering the different regions in Ethiopia. And some of these relevant units, relevant sectors in Ethiopia with their supervisory agency include maybe in terms of sector like forest, soil, land and wildlife. We have the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, and some of the laws within this sector include the Forest and Wildlife Conservation and Development Proclamation of 1992 of 1980. So also in terms of the land, sector of land, we have Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, and we have laws like the Land Use Proclamation of 2005. Also have agency like the Environmental Protection, Land Administration and Use Authority. So there are a lot of them. Mineral and energy sector, we have the Ministry of Mines and Energy, and we have laws like the Mining Proclamation of 1993. The Water Resources has Ministry of Water Resources, and which covers, we came up with laws like Ethiopian Standard Regulation of 1990, Ethiopian Water Resources Management Proclamation of 2000. Then the public health, we have the Ministry of Health, and we have under that, we have the Public Health Proclamation of 2002, and also have Addis Ababa City Municipal Administration. We came up with a law in terms of the hygienic and environmental sanitation regulation. That was in 1994. And even the cultural and archaeological heritage sector have a ministry, supervisory ministry, also that supervises anything that has to do with environmental impact assessment in that sector, which is the Ministry of Information and Culture. And the laws that are guiding the EIA in this sector has to do with the proclamation of 1989. The proclamation provides for the study and protection of articulates in Ethiopia. And even the radiation, when it has to do with the radioactive substances, the National Radiation Protection Authority is the agency that takes charge of environmental issues in the radiation sector. And they came up with a laws like the Proclamation of Radiation Protection Law 1979 of 1993. So there are a lot of sectors, the energy, the petroleum, genetic resources and community knowledge. The Ethiopian system or government really have a very robust agency or structure as to managing environmental issues, which covers all these agencies, virtually all the this agency has laws to manage the environmental issues, try to protect the environment. So the impact of all the sectors on the environment are adequately controlled or taken care of from all these agencies. For instance, the Genetic Resources and Community Knowledge has the Institute of Biodiversity Conservation, which is like an agency that tries to manage any issue that has to do with biodiversity conservation, trying to manage the genetic resources of biological diversity, whether flora and fauna within the Ethiopian country. And the laws that they try to come up with to help them in this aspect has to do with the Institute of Biodiversity Conservation and Research Establishment Proclamation, which was in 2004. And we also have another one like the Access to Genetic Resources and Community Knowledge and Community Right Proclamation in 2006. So the basic thing there is that Ethiopia manages this environment through laws known as proclamation. So this is like equivalent to the act that we have in Nigerian constitutional setting. So theirs is called proclamation, and they were formulated in different years covering different sectors. So different sectors, basic value, that is they have also for plant breeding, they have for fisheries, they have for tourism, pollution, irrigation, transport, air quality, a number of them, water quality, biosafety, and pesticide. All these sectors were adequately captured and proclamations made to manage the environmental issues from these sectors. I will maybe pause at this point to hand over to the moderator. So before we now look at the other aspects that have to do with the environmental laws in Ethiopia. Over to you, moderator.
Thank you very much. The next thing I'm going to be talking about is the compliance and enforcement strategies. We all know that as humans, it is actually not always very easy for people to abide by laid down rules and regulations. I know in Nigeria, there are certain fines that are attached to as penalties to defaulters if, for instance, they did not carry out a particular assessment or the other, or if they are violated, or if they are polluting the environment in a manner. There are certain penalties and fines that are attached to those kind of people. So I would like to know, our contributors to tell us about some of the strategies that are put in place to ensure that all these regulations that we've heard about are being abided by. Over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, yes, we have a lot. As I've said earlier, there are agencies, there are ministries, and their department that make sure that all these environmental laws are being complied with. And for instance, in the Ministry of Mines and Mineral Sectors, we have the Mines and Mineral Act 2009, and then in that act there's a particular section that talks about the fines that must be paid for people that do not comply with the environmental laws that are being stated in that particular act, and some other sections or some other acts too. Also, for the Wildlife Conservation Act, it is stated there that a person that encroach into the parks, the national parks, or into the forest to do some illegal activities, there are some fines and there are some compensation that such persons must make. So, and there are provisions for the people that do not comply with the environmental. There are provision for fines. There are provision for compensation for the activities that do not comply with these environmental laws in the environmental and legislation that exists in Syria alone. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, maybe I will just chip in something when it has to do with Ethiopia. So there is what we call permits and licenses in Ethiopia, and the permit and license is the duty of licensing agency in Ethiopia, which is an organ of the government empowered by law to issue an investment permit, trade or operating license or work permit, or as the case may be, it may apply. So according to the EIA proclamation, so any licensing agency shall, prior to the issue of this investment permit or trade, ensure that the authority or the relevant regional environmental agency has authority to implement these licenses, that's in terms of the environmental impact assessment. And it doesn't stop at this. There are offenses and penalties. And for the sake of this workshop, so approval of an environmental impact study report or the granting of authority by the authority or the relevant regional agency does not make free proponent from liability or damage. So it doesn't mean that because you have been given a license, you are free from liability or damage. So there are a lot of offenses and penalty even after the EIA report has been approved. And in this regard, now it talks about that any person that commits an offense shall be liable to accordingly if she or she violates the provision of the environmental proclamation or any other relevant law or directive. And also, the person shall be liable to a fine not less than 50,000 barrels and not more than 100,000 barrels. Maybe we need to look at the equivalent of that in US dollars. These are the fines that are attached to as fines without obtaining. If a person doesn't obtain authority from obtain authorization or from the authority or relevant regional environmental agency, or makes false presentation in an environmental impact assessment study report. So even in the environmental impact assessment study report, if it is discovered that false proclamation or false information were provided, there is a penalty attached to that. And also there is a fine not less than 10,000 barrels and not more than 20,000 barrels if the person fails to keep records or to fulfill condition of authorization issued pursuant to the EIA proclamation. So if the conditions, for instance, environmental management plan for you to follow through the project stages, and if the person fails to abide by this, there are penalties for that. And also they are fined not less than 5,000 barrels or not more than 10,000 barrels if the person being in addition to whatever penalty may be meted with, fails to exercise all due diligence in terms of managing environmental issues that has to do with project. So there are a lot of them there, and all these are managed by the Ethiopian Environmental Protection Agency. They are the supervisory ministry that ensures that all these fines and penalties are appropriately meted out or fined by the fine to the regulator, the proponents, or any company that violates some of these rules that have been laid down right from the approval stage to the EIA report approval. So at this point, I will hand over to the moderator.
Okay, thank you very much. In case you're just joining us, we are having a review of environmental regulations in Africa. And so far we have been taking a look at different countries in Africa. We started with Egypt. We have taken a look at South Africa. Right now we are reviewing that of Syria and Ethiopia. And our contributors have actually been giving us insight and several information as to the environmental laws and regulations that exist in each of those countries. So, like I said earlier, in case you have contribution you would like to make to the topic under discuss, you can use the raising of hand icon so that an unmute notification can be sent to you for you to hear your views. It is interesting to know that all these regulations are put in place to establish standards of operations. It is interesting to know that they are put in place to maintain law order, and most importantly, it is good to know that these regulations are put in place to protect the environment, and not just the environment, it spreads to the human rights as well, humans and environment. So I would like our speakers to also say something about an overall or a general overview of the regulations that they have reviewed individually about any of these countries they would like to talk about. Over to you, Mr. Sunday. Let's start with you.
Okay, I'm talking about Sierra Leone. I think Sierra Leone is doing fair. I won't say they are doing good, and I don't say they are doing bad, but they are fair because if you look at some of their regulations that deal with the environment, they are being reviewed periodically, and they are recent. They are recent, like that. The National Environmental Protection Act. It was promulgated in 2000 and has been reviewed. It was reviewed in 2008 and it was also amended in 2010. In 2010 to 2021, that was just about 11 years ago. Whereas in some other countries, the last time they reviewed some of their acts maybe 20, 30 years ago. All right, so also if you look at their Mines and Mineral Act, the latest version of that act was the 2009 version. Also, their national lands policy, it was recent. I wouldn't say it was recent, but it was the last review was done in 2005. And also their environmental and social regulations for the mineral sectors, the last review was done in 2012. The local government act that talks about the socioeconomic aspect of the EIA, that takes care of the socioeconomic aspect, it was enacted in 2004 and it was amended in 2017. 2017 to 2021 was just about 4 years ago. So if you look at all this review of the law, that shows that Sierra Leone as a country, they are being fair, they are being committed to environment, but there are some of their laws that I won't say is outdated, but it's been a long time that they are reviewed it last. For instance, the Factories Act, it was enacted, and I don't think it has been reviewed since 1974. 1974, that's a very long time. Also, the Forestry Act, it was enacted, and then the last time it was reviewed, it was in 1988. It was in 1988. So I think Sierra Leone is doing fair. And then if you look at them, they are also part of the international bodies. They are also signatories to some of the international environmental legislations that are available. So Sierra Leone is I will say they are doing fairly well, and I believe they can still do it better.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Yeah, in the case of Ethiopia, there are so many unique things which makes the Ethiopian laws or as vision for managing the environment very unique. So that given the constitutional provision for the environment, that is in section 2 of the law sets out a lot of provisions, and this follows the basic principle of core of environmental laws. So these basic principles are formulated following the vision that the Ethiopian government has for basic principle when it has to do with the environment. And some of these include that they recognize the concept of sustainable development through rational utilization and management of the environment to help improve the living condition of the society and the maintenance of biodiversity and ecosystem. So this is one key thing which is part of the principle and core mandate, which has to do with environmental law in Ethiopia. And also they incorporate there's an incorporation of the polluter pays principle. Polluter pays principle in the pollution control legislation and the application of the environmental laws. So they don't take it lightly with anybody that pollutes the environment. There's a strict and heavy penalty for that. And also they try to integrate, look at integration of equity in the use of non-renewable resources without compromising the need of the future generation. Also, they try to promote market and non-market based incentive and benefits by encouraging developer and the public to appreciate the harmony between individual and public interests in the environment matter. So they even look at the aspect of individuals, human, try to promote the market and non-market based. They try to come up with incentives to ensure that the developers or companies that are into developing the economy or coming up with projects in the economy have some incentive that could guide them or to interest them to try to come up with sustainable actions as a basic principle for managing the environment in Ethiopia. So these are a lot of things that the Ethiopian laws that makes the Ethiopian laws very interesting. And also there are requirements for comprehensive legislation that is supported by efficient institutional mechanism to implement the complex multi-sectoral issues related to the environment. So a whole lot of these are some of the basic principles that are reflected in the Ethiopian law, which makes it unique and also effective in managing the environment in this country. So I will hand over to the moderator at this point.
Okay, thank you very much for your responses. Before I roll out my last set of questions, which has to do with your recommendation on ways by which these countries can improve or ways by which they can ensure effective implementation of their regulation, Mr. Boyega has been raising his hand. So I will send an unmute notification to him now so that he can also make his contribution. But please make it brief. You have just 2 minutes to speak. Over to you, Mr. Boyega.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's been a very, very long day, and thank you for this opportunity to speak. I'm just kind of going to make maybe my contribution very brief and then more of sharing my concern with respect to legal framework for Africa's environmental regulations. Over time, it appears that for Africa countries, a number of the regulations we have today came as a result of something that had happened, and then there was need for us to act. So it didn't take Nigeria to establish maybe FEPA, just not until the cocoa, the cocoa toxic dump happened. And several other Africa countries, right? Now, why do we have non-effective regulations, and then we now have more of them being duplicitous, that it gives rooms for people to circumvent, to flout them. EIA most times are not respected at times because of what it takes, what it entails to have one in place. People begin to, do all sorts to put all of these things together. And the effect of all of this is reflecting on our environment. We can see a recent one, the collapsed building at Ikoyi, is a result of lacuna in all of these laws. So for Africa, for example, we have UNEP, right? So which is the biggest environmental decision-making body in Africa? Then we talk about AMCEN, the African Ministerial Conference on the Environment. Now, the African Ministerial Conference on the Environment, are they independent? Because they've been housed within UNEP since the 80s. When are they going to be independent? When is Africa going to take that bold step to begin to have that forefront that we would have, that cohesion and coherence, that we are able to speak? So I look forward to COP27 to address this, and I believe that we're able to put these things together. So for me, for Nigeria, really, we need to do a lot. When was the last time our EIA law has been updated? I attended the EIA program workshop done by Dr. Asokoro in Lagos, I think about 2 years or thereabout now. And then the head of NESRIA that I attended said, the review of that law is in progress, but for how long? And these are what has been expressed by some of the contributors here. So I think there's need for us to be smart in all of these things. Thank you. This is my concern and my contribution to this very laudable workshop that you are holding. Thank you so much. And I have learned a lot as well from the contributors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Boyega. Is a bit of a concern. Truly, it's a concern. And we need our regulators to truly be awakened to all those concerns and do something about it. Not just talk and talk about it, but actions need to be taken. Thank you. If you have any other person who would like to contribute, please raise your hand so that you can be brought up to speak. And this will take me to the last question that I have for the contributors. What are the recommendations that you have, or what are the ways that you feel that these countries that we have reviewed today can improve, especially in the aspect of ensuring effective implementation of these regulations? I said earlier, action is very, very important. It's not just about having those regulations in place, but how are they being implemented? So what are the ways that you think they can improve? Over to you, our contributors.
Okay, thank you very much. As a parting word, I think we have all realized that reviews of these laws is what is really necessary and what we really need in Africa at the moment, because we are really particular about African continent. And if we can be a little more proactive, after the reviews, we are just trying to x-ray or pinpoint some countries in the North, South, and West and East Africa, the whole of continent, a whole lot of countries rather, that we have looked at, and we have seen similar trend that some of these laws needs to be reviewed. So, like a recommendation, I will try to point out the need for reviews of some of these laws, like what we had in Ethiopia the last time, and what they are actually using now is a proclamation in 2002. Although it's still a little recent, but we will have the last contribution from Mr. Boyega. We need synergy among African countries to come up with their own standard body, whereby we will be need for constant review and updates of this law. So that's what I will look forward to, and I will recommend for in terms of ensuring effective implementation of environmental laws in Africa and these countries. Thank you very much.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Boyega. That was a very nice contribution. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Okenye. So I will channel my own recommendations to the mining sector. If you look at our environmental effect, most of the environmental impacts that we are having today is coming from the mining sector. Most of them in all the African countries. And if you look at the African countries, almost all the African countries have 1 or 2 mineral resources. Like in the case of Syria alone is a country that is very rich in diamonds. And if you look at what diamond has done to them, diamond has done harm to them. They have fought for almost 11 years because of diamonds. 11 years of civil war. And I know most of you will be familiar with blood diamond. So they have fought for almost 11 years. And why did this occur? I think the first thing is because there was no proper environmental or social law that takes care of that sector. And if there was, the enforcement was very weak. It was very weak. So my own recommendation is, and okay, before I leave that, I will say, and if you look at all these mineral resources in African countries, you see that most of them are being mined by artisanal miners, by illegal miners. So what I just recommend is that these African countries, they should look for a way in which they can integrate these illegal miners. Maybe you can turn them to legal artisanal miners, so that you can have people that mine mineral resources with the environment in mind. Because if you look at all these illegal miners, they just do the activities from they dig the hole there, move to the second place, from there move to another location, from there move to another location, without taking care of the environment. And their activities is having a huge negative impact on the environment, the soil, the water bodies, and then the air. So my own recommendation will be channeled towards that sector, the mining sector. If the people that are in charge of the environment in the African countries, if they can see a way in which they can stop these illegal mining activities, I think our environment will be a better place, and we all live in a safe environment. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate you once again. Just before we wrap up, we have one other person here, Timothy. I will send an unmute notification to you now. You have just 2 minutes to make your contribution. Over to you now.
Thank you, Dr. Ade, and the speakers. That was a very good one. Just to contribute in line with the last speaker, that is before your moderators, you made mention to the COP26 and African participation. I think generally we're just trying to talk about the role Africa can play. That is the AMC being under UNEP and all that. I think it would be fair to mention that even from the COP26, the African group took a stance from Gabon to Guinea. In short, the presence of Africa, I think, is also felt when it comes to global regulation on environmental issues. After all, we are bringing one down to Egypt, talking about the COP27. So we are getting there. We are getting there. If the annual declaration of the NDC, for example, the National Determined Contribution, talking about climate change, that's a good place to start with. We are getting there. I think the problem we have, some of these laws are actually obsolete. And some of the, what I call it, deterrence for people not to continue to pollute the environment is minute. Is minute because of most of them are, just like I said, is obsolete. I know we are talking about reviewing the EIA Act, but beyond that, there are other things that needs to be looked at. I'm not sure we have a national regulation on forestry, for example. The global issue now is tending towards carbon credits and carbon stock, talking about our forests. So that aspect of forest conservation, for example, I'm not sure we have a national regulation that we can just pick up and say this address almost all the issues as regards to forests or afforestation or even the carbon credits as it may be. So some other trending issues are coming up in the environment that we don't seem to have updated or modernized regulation or even policy or talk less of law to keep up to date with the trends. So that's where I think NESRA is doing a good job in terms of enforcement, because no matter how good these laws and regulations are, is enforcement of it that is the key. The National Assembly have done a good job also recently with the bill, with the recent climate bill passage. So I think if just like Richflood is doing very good, other consultants can take a cue from Richflood and keep raising this awareness, meet the legislators, the executive, and keep brainstorming on how to make some of these laws and regulations come up to or up to date, it would be good. So having said that, Richflood, well done. And I think other consultants should take a cue from this. And we keep letting people know that these enforcement, these regulations needs to be enforced and abide by. Well done.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Thank you so much. And like we say, awareness is the key. Sensitization is very important. And, you know, this way, if we continue and we are all committed to safeguarding the environment, before we know it, everybody will know about it and we know the right thing to do and do it. With this, we've come to the end of this workshop, and we want to say thank you to everyone for your active participation. We thank you for staying this far, and we believe that you have a deep understanding as to what some countries have in stock as their environmental regulations, and then, you know, we have been able to successfully review about 5 countries within the African continent, and we appreciate you for your participation. We thank you for coming. We thank you for joining us. Next month, we are going to be having another workshop, and it's going to be on sustainable banking. So if you're an investor, it is important that you make it a date with us. And the recording of this particular video would be made available on our YouTube channel. So you can check us out on YouTube, check Richflood. You will see the video of this one and the past workshops that we have held there. And if you have contribution or further question that you would like to ask us about this particular training topic or any other workshop that we have had, you can send us an email, info@richflood.com. You send it to info@richflood.com, and be rest assured that you will be attended to promptly. Thank you so much. Just before we call it a day, finally, we would like to take a good photograph. So whatever you have, please open your camera. We'll send an unmute, we'll send the notification to everyone. Yes, I have so many other comments here. I have some comments and I have a few questions. I just wanted us to hear from some people. That's why we had to adopt that approach of allowing people to speak freely in this particular workshop. We wanted it to be very interactive. So all your comments are duly noted. Thank you very much. Those appreciating Richflood for this workshop, we appreciate you too for coming to make it a date with us. So our technical team, please send notification to everyone here so that they can open their camera. If you're in your office, you can call your colleagues to join you so that they take the group photographs together. Prince Lekon Fadino, thank you very much for joining us, and thanks for your comments. You were well received. Mr. Boyega Olorunfemi, we appreciate you. Thank you so much. Mr. Jeffrey Oshunde, thank you. Madam Rita Babatunde, thank you. Madam Amarachi Nwokoro, we are yet to see your video. Please open your video. Let's see your beautiful face. Mr. Timothy Ogenyi, thank you so much for your contribution. Prince Will, thank you. Thank you very much for coming. Mr. Boyega Olorunfemi, thanks for your contribution. Barrister Jude, thank you so much. We appreciate you. We appreciate you. We had an insightful session with you this morning. Thank you for coming again this afternoon session. Madam Faith, we appreciate you. Thanks for coming up. Thanks for attending this workshop. We hope you see all of you again next month when we'll be bringing to you another topic, and some resource persons will be speaking to us on the topic that we'll bring to you. Once again, thank you very much. We appreciate you for coming. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Oh, Mr. Bachi, thank you for showing your face. And our contributors, we appreciate you so much. Mr. Ukeme Yellow, Mr. Ujo Sunday, Barrister Jude, thank you so much. Madam Amarachi, wow, you look so good. She's actually working and she still made it a date with us. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. We are happy to have you. We are happy to have you. You know, people that are committed to knowledge, people that are committed to learning new things and all of that. It is through this method that we can know what is right to be done and we do it. So let's keep up the sensitization. Prince Lekon, thank you very much. Until we meet again, have a wonderful evening.